Well, the floods that wreaked havoc in KwaZulu-Natal recently could have a life-altering impact on survivors. Besides the structural damage caused, people had sustained severe emotional trauma as a result. But how exactly are people expected to cope with a disaster of such magnitude? Now, let's discuss this. We are now joined via Zoom by Clinical Psychologist Nozi Nyawose. Ms. Nyawose, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, these scenes continue to play in front of us, are just harrowing and devastating, and it just doesn't end. I mean, our senior reporter is at a scene currently where a woman who was trapped underground, her body is currently being retrieved. When we start to speak about the scale of the devastation, this is going to have a huge psychological impact on not only the people in KwaZulu-Natal, but also the people in this country.
Thank you, Nasi, for having me. I mean, firstly, the timing couldn't have been worse for the province's economy. There's continuous trauma time and time again. And I think people haven't had the opportunity to heal and to grieve from previous and past traumas, including COVID-19 and obviously July unrest. And now very tragic what people are going through. I mean, the loss of homes. A home is a sense of belonging for anyone. The loss of lives, the death toll keeps rising and increasing. Operations are affected, loss of income, and so much more. So the severe devastation is going to cause quite significant psychological effects to people.
And of course, this is going to have a huge impact, like you say, psychologically on everybody. But what does this mean for children? I mean, the clip or the story before this interview of a 10-year-old a little girl who is the only survivor, from this devastation in her family, her parents and young baby brother trapped underground their home and unfortunately lost their lives. She is the sole survivor. How is she even going to begin to pick up the pieces?
I mean, it's quite sad. A family is the family environment is the most significant for a child. I mean, it's where the psychosocial stages occur. It's where the identity occurs. It's where the nurturing occurs. But now the child has completely lost everything, and she's going to be stuck in a stage of confusion, sadness, and so much grief. So it's going to be very heartbreaking. And I think this is where the community has to come and play a significant role, because your parents are not only your family, but the community that you come from. So I think that's where the community will really have to be playing a significant role for the child, offering as much support as they can. Because, I mean, the psychological effects that are associated with this aftermath are unmatched.
We hear of the sheer scale of schools that have been damaged in KwaZulu-Natal. A lot of those children, some of them might not go to school, some may go to school. I mean, where do you start with the therapy in terms of, somebody who's gone through a trauma like this? I mean, not everybody is going to get the help that they need, but also we can't ignore, what has happened. So just from your viewpoint, how quickly should one start getting the therapy that they need, and where can government then start assisting in this regard?
I mean, well, the sad part is that the majority of Durban has been affected, including the public health care sectors, for people to attend. And continuous trauma, we know, has really detrimental impacts. There's depression, there's anxiety, and the fear that this may occur again. There's chronic PTSD, which is your post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, which manifest itself in very many clinical forms in children and in adults. And because PTSD is the direct expression and the interaction between the trauma and the person, and this will include behavioral changes, mood changes, and psychological effects. So we need as much help as we can at this moment. Obviously, with the effect of the infrastructure and the hospitals, we're still trying to contribute as much as we can as healthcare providers. And furthermore, there's a lot of feelings that come with this trauma. There's suicidality to victims who have lost possibly everything. So I think that we need to get as much help as we can But we do know that the government has been contributing quite a lot currently and doing the best that they can at this point in time. I mean, the damage in infrastructure, it's contributing to a lot of delays, and I know people have been quite frustrated by that. But civil society and humanitarian groups have been called for urgent interventions, especially in informal settlements, and people must try their best to cooperate and help each other as best as they can.
There are those that are directly affected, and so it seems much clearer in terms of the kind of help that they need. But there are also those that are indirectly affected and therefore don't think they necessarily need the help. You know, those that have rescued someone, as an example, but also journalists who are covering the story. You know, where and how do they start to begin to just process what they are doing and what they are seeing, and also just the scale of what could impact them at a later stage?
You know, I think the scary part with trauma is that sometimes, whether direct trauma or indirect trauma, you wouldn't experience the symptoms immediately. But long after or shortly after, you do start experiencing symptoms and changes. And that is quite expected from a lot of people. So I think some of the symptoms include changes, flashbacks, panic attacks, dissociation, and a lot of coping mechanisms which may be unhealthy as people try to sort of run away from what they've seen and all the trauma. So I think people should avoid a lot of maladaptive behavior and substance abuse, which can be common as coping mechanisms, and it's associated with the deterioration of mental health. So any help that people can get, whether they've experienced direct or indirect trauma, is really advised.
Nozi Nyawose, thank you so much for that insight and your time this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Clinical Psychologist Nozi Nyawose there.